Before we stepped into this conversation, before I hit record, you mentioned something about building community.
Is never completed by one person. It takes a team. It may not be completed when the initiator of the project, the planner, the visionary of the project is still alive. It may take other people to finish the project.
I come back from the AT. That's going to be a very intentional focus is to build community.
Yeah, so this is so important to me because when my son died by suicide.
You're at the foundations, but do you have a vision of what?
Is in really wanting to hold on to the idea that grief is only for the death of a loved one, when we know that that's not true.
So building community around when somebody passes is a little different story. It's good to see you again.
It is good to see you again, too. I feel like it has been far too long that we have been in real time speaking to each other.
It has. And people have told me not to, time and date stamp my videos, but it's coming on Christmas and it's 2025. And this has been a very, very long year, not according to my daughter, but
yeah,
lots of things are happening and we've reconnected mostly on LinkedIn. I've kind of been separating myself from LinkedIn only because of my preparation and training for the Appalachian Trail, but everybody else's life, who I've seen, constantly posting, constantly engaging. And for one, I apologize. I just want to apologize up front for not being as active only because I've adopted a dog. Her name is Ashley, and her and I are going to hike the Appalachian Trail, but that's not what this conversation's all about. You've given me some food for thought, and the word today is Cathedral, the Cathedral project. And so I need you, before we even start, continue this conversation, tell everybody who watches my vlog who you are and what you've been doing this year.
Yeah, and you don't need to apologize at all because we're all watching in the posts that you do how much time you're spending preparing for this epic walk, which just boggles my mind. It's completely not something I would even aspire to do. It's no version of my reality. So we're all watching in amazement what you're doing and giving you loads of grace for not being busy on the socials because you're off walking miles and miles and miles and miles for this great cause. So yes, I'm Suzanne Jabour. I'm in Vancouver, Canada, and I'm a grief guide and educator. And what I've been doing for the last year is working one-on-one with clients, working with organizations, working as a speaker. My TEDx came out in, I did it in January, so it's almost a year. I know, it's unbelievable. What a ride that was. It's totally bonkers. Anyway, I did it at the end of January and it came out in March. So that was a big part of what I spent that time doing. And so, yeah, I've been speaking, I've been coaching, I've been training, really here as I'm very clear that my role is to be a disruptor. And I was saying to someone this morning, I had to get really comfortable with making other people uncomfortable. Because if you're not a little bit uncomfortable, there's no reason to change. And so if something I say makes you a little bit uncomfortable, but doesn't push you away, then I'm doing my job. And mostly I want people to feel uncomfortable about how the system around grief works because it's working as designed and it's terrible for everybody. And I want, while you feel that discomfort and realization, to feel really deeply seen and heard and understood by whatever knowledge or lived experience or story I'm sharing. So that's what I've been busy doing. Nothing much.
Okay. Well, there's a lot there to unpack, but not for today's conversation. Again, you gave me something to think about. And the reason being is because we're both on, I think, a vision, a mission that's bigger than either of us. And you called it a cathedral project. So talk to me about what that is in your perspective, and then what your cathedral is.
So when I was starting to really clarify my mission and what I was actually here to do around in the grief space, I jokingly said to someone, actually they said, what's your goal? What do you really want? And I said, to be completely honest, I'm actually looking for global domination and systems change. And I say that kind of jokingly, but it's also 100% the truth. I want global systems change in all the places where the system of grief isn't functioning very well, which is not all of them, but it's a lot of them. And they said to me, oh, well, that's your cathedral project then. And I had never heard that term before. And I sort of immediately went to, okay, well, no, I'm not building any religious thing because that's not me. And they were like, no. The cathedral project is the one that you start that's really big and maybe likely won't be finished in your lifetime. And there was something about that that really landed in a really interesting way for me, because it kind of both released the pressure in a weird way, because if it was a cathedral project, I wasn't doing it all by myself. No single person ever built a cathedral or anything that, I mean, maybe I'm building the Sydney Opera House. Maybe that lands better for me as a sort of theater music lover. But that kind of big project is never completed by one person. It takes a team. It may not be completed when the initiator of the project, the planner, the visionary of the project is still alive. It may take other people to finish the project. And we've seen that happen in art. We've seen it happen in architecture and building of cathedrals. And so what that meant for me is I didn't have to do it alone, and I didn't have to worry that I wasn't getting enough done. And what became mine to really own was, well, what would that look like? What is my cathedral? Like, what, if I could have done everything I came here to do, what would the world then look like? So that also really freed up some creativity. It freed up some like imagining of what might be possible if I didn't have to do it all by myself in this lifetime. Well, then you can dream really big dreams because they don't have to be done in your lifetime and you don't have to do them by yourself. That opens up the scope of the visions that we have. And, you know, I feel like you also have this really big vision around veteran mental health that, you know, it would be my fervent wish that we could get it down to zero long before your lifetime is over. And that might not be the case. And that's okay, because in these big sort of system collective projects, we're here, you know, I sort of think like I'm here to push the boulder as far as I can. I'm here to lay the foundation. And when I'm envisioning, I'm like, okay, so we're laying foundation still. Yep, still laying foundation. I'm like so excited for when I will feel that shift to like, oh, now we're putting up the walls. Like, this is getting exciting. I think in my space, we're still really foundational. There's still such a lack of knowledge and understanding that that's really the groundwork that I'm working hard to lay. That was the point of the TEDx talk, was to have something out there that had lots of information and sort of perspective shifting in it. So it was kind of a twofold bonus. Was, you know, it takes off some pressure, makes the project really important and sort of big and majestic, and also allows it to be really massive in scope. Because if it's not just mine, and I'm here to do as much as I can, my part, and I need other people to do it too, that's a whole different dream you can dream.
You know what? I like that. And I like all that. And most recently, and this is kind of where I kind of fit into the same space, and it's not necessarily for the Trail to Transformation Foundation, which is my cathedral project. And as you said, you know, the specific focus, and maybe I should, and well, now I'm rambling because there's lots of pieces here. You know, the mission would be zero, as you said, zero veterans dying by suicide every day. Because right now, specifically, it started in 2012. Where the VA, the Veterans Administration, published data suggested that 22 veterans die by suicide every day. At this point, the number is down. VA numbers, 17 and a half. I don't know where you get the half from. I guess it's a math thing.
Yeah, statistics, great. Like,
yeah, depending on source, that number ranges. There's some data that suggests 40, you know. I don't know specifically how they're getting these numbers, and I'm not a data tracker by any means, but zero is a good number.
Yeah.
But I said all that to say, most recently, I've struggled with all of these things that I'm trying to do. And so I'm trying to do three things in parallel. Prepare for the Appalachian Trail in 2026. And so you talked about this monumental thing that you don't want, that you didn't think you would ever be a part of.
No, I will cheer very loudly from here, but I will not be on the trail with you.
Oh, one day, maybe I'll convince you.
Never say never. I learned that the hard way many times.
I want to jump into the public speaking arena. as a veteran, as a disabled veteran, and as one who struggles with suicide and depression. And I want to build this foundation. I want to build my cathedral. I was so hesitant to kind of step into any of these things. One, for the very thing that we're talking about, am I ever really going to be able to finish what I start? And that was problematic for me. The other part is stepping on stage. And it had, not that stepping on stage scares me, because I've done it before and I've been in the college classroom, so I've got the experience, but not necessarily, 100 or more, audience members.
Mm-hmm.
My fear was I'm still in the healing process.
Yeah.
Of all the stuff that I deal with. And I may never be, air quotes, healed. I may never be perfect. And that was the word I've been using for myself, was perfect. Then what qualifies me to step on stage and talk about suicide prevention and suicide awareness to others if I'm not healed from PTSD, psychosis, and suicide ideation? Because I wake up every morning in a dread. That's part of my being.
Mm-hmm.
But then I make the choice to get out of bed,
Yep.
eat breakfast, because I have put myself on a mission to hike the Appalachian Trail. And that's what gets me moving every day, is that mission, hiking the Appalachian Trail.
Mm-hmm.
And once I recognized that I didn't have to be perfect, I didn't have to be healed, it freed me up to say, yeah, your message is good enough. You can add value to an audience. You can step on stage.
And I would suggest that in some ways, you're more powerful, not perfect, and not completely healed. And because there's something about when we're really vulnerable and honest and real that allows us to connect with each other's stories in a different way. And I sometimes feel like when we're talking, when we're sharing a story that's completely healed and it's all like perfect, we're sharing it from a different space. When we're sharing something that's completely healed, we're sharing it in a different way than we are when it's not completely raw, because we don't want to share from there either necessarily. That's too vulnerable for people. But when it's still something that's quite present for us, that's really compelling. And there's something very powerful about hearing from someone who still has the issues, still has the thoughts, and is intentionally crafting a life that requires something more. Like, that's really what courage looks like. That's what bravery looks like. That's what is a compelling human story, right? That even though I still have these feelings, and even though I still have this thought every once in a while, or every day, or however often, I'm choosing to do something about it, and here's what I'm doing. And here's why it's working for me. And here's how I can take what I'm learning and help other people too. That's really compelling.
Before we stepped into this conversation, before I hit record, you mentioned something about building community, which is vital to anything that we do. If we're building something as large as a cathedral, having community around us is important. Now, I have not yet, I've kind of done that. I've started doing it, like for both of us, we're in our foundational builds. After I come back from the AT, that's going to be a very intentional focus, is to build community here locally and nationally through social media. What does it mean, and this is specific to you, what does it mean to build community around grief? And what does that look like?
That is such a juicy question. So, if my end game is for us to have very easeful conversations naturally about grief of all different sorts, then what that requires is for us as a collective to reach that tipping point where more people understand and aren't scared than people who don't understand and are scared. So, because that's the thing that gives us that big sense of community.
Before you continue, can we just add, for those who may not know, why this is important to you, please, if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just
well, it's part of what connects us.
Yeah, so just kind of add that small piece to it.
Yeah, so this is so important to me because when my son died by suicide 5 years ago, which is astonishing to me to think it's that long and also feels like yesterday, which is how grief and time work. I ended up scared and isolated because I didn't know enough about grief to do it the way that felt healthy to me. And the stories and things I was reading were not how I wanted to do it. And people who I thought would show up for me didn't. And I became really curious about why that was. Why didn't I know? Like, I had experienced the death of my dad. I had experienced the death of my mom. I had been around grief and loss and other people grieving, but I didn't know enough about how this really worked this time around, because I came to realize people who were in those griefs with me, who were grieving the same loss, we didn't really have a lot of conversation about our grief. We talked about the person, maybe we did what we, created rituals to keep them present, all of those kinds of things, but we didn't really talk about what was happening to us in grief. Looking back, I can see that a lot of the things I experienced when Ben died, my mom had experienced when my dad died. But we didn't talk about it that way. And so I really feel like had we had those conversations, I would have been better equipped when Ben died. So that was one aspect, was the curiosity about why aren't grievers sharing their stories? Why aren't we sharing the physical symptoms and all the things that happen to us? And why are people who are compassionate, caring, loving, connected, unable to show up in these big griefy spaces? And both of those are about education. They're both about the knowledge and the understanding, because right now we have a lot of fear. And to me, the way we get out of fear is with information. Knowledge is always power. So if I can help people understand what might be true, because every grief is different, every time it's different, but there are some similarities, some commonalities that we maybe could start to recognize better, that has become that foundational piece, right? That's where really community starts to click. Because if we all have a shared understanding of how this might work, then we're not scared to have a conversation about it, because I have a sense of what I might be able to say, right? I was talking to someone the other day who is from the US, so they had just had Thanksgiving. We had ours in October. It's not a thing we're talking about anymore. But they had just had Thanksgiving, and they had had a lovely family gathering. And she was talking to a dear friend whose daughter had died. And she started telling her about her Thanksgiving, and she said to me, I just stopped mid-sentence because I realized she, of course, hadn't had her whole family gather at Thanksgiving because her whole family isn't present on the planet anymore. And so the person I was talking to kind of stuttered to a stop mid-sentence, and bless her friend that she was talking to, she said to her, you know what, it's okay. It's okay for you to share with me the beautiful gathering you had with your family. It's okay to do that. I would like to hear about it. So that ended up beautiful. What becomes possible if we're having that conversation up front? And I feel comfortable to say as a griever, you know what? And this is how I felt. I didn't want to hear about what a great time you had had with your son. I didn't want to hear about it for the first, 18 months. I would just scroll past all my friends' posts about their kids and they're getting married and they're having babies and they're doing whatever they're doing. They had this great breakthrough at work, whatever it was. I was like, nope, I just cannot. I can't. I'm thrilled for you and I can't hold that. So if we could have that conversation, because I know as the supporter, this might be tricky, and as the griever, this might be tricky, and we can talk about it and ask the questions and come to some kind of shared agreement, then we don't have that awkward moment of the stutter stop and the and then we want to kind of back quietly away from what we think is this unexploded moment. So understanding and knowledge shifts everything, because then we can communicate differently.
So I have to ask, this cathedral that you're building, metaphorically speaking, of course.
Yes.
You're at the foundations, but do you have a vision of what it should look like, even though you may not see it to completion?
So I have kind of two concepts. One is, and I have said this right from the beginning, that we would speak about our grief as easily and casually and naturally as we would share on a Monday morning what we watched over the weekend. That it would be that natural and easy a part of our interaction as humans. So that's one piece. And that to me feels like a cathedral project. I don't know that we're going to get there in my lifetime. I'm only 58. I got a lot of time left, and I'll be doing this until I can't do it anymore. So there's time, and I know that's big. The other piece is also a community piece. And if we think about how we come together around birth, so from the second we know someone is pregnant, or from the minute they show, and people who don't even know them can tell they're pregnant, we are surrounded by community. We don't necessarily want it all. We get strangers come up to you in the grocery store and touch your belly. Like, we don't necessarily want that, thank you so much. But we feel seen, we feel heard, we feel understood. I had people tell me their horrifying birth stories, and as a first-time pregnant person, I didn't understand why that was happening, because I didn't really like it, until I got to hour 30 of my 36-hour labor with my daughter, and was very grateful to know that women who I knew and trusted and thought were intelligent had made it through this birth thing and chosen to do it again. So, I just have to keep on going. Like there's a choice. There isn't.
Well,
We show up with everything you might need. We come with unsolicited advice, which you maybe don't want, but might later become helpful. There's books. There's, rec center. You go to the mom and tot fitness class. Like, we come together in community. There's tons of opportunities to be with other people. And at the other end of life, we don't do that yet.
Well, you just said something. It just clicked. There's only 24 hours in a day, and you said it was 36 hours of
Correct.
labor. Okay.
Yeah, more than a day. Isn't that fun? It was awesome.
I can't.
36.
I can't imagine, and so.
Luckily, our bodies have a brilliant system of kind of softening all of that memory of how awful it was. Though I still do occasionally have moments where I'm like, holy man, yeah, that happened too. Okay. I was a very goal-oriented A-type personality at the time, and so I just knew I had to get through this to get the thing I wanted, which was a child, and I was prepared to do anything I had to get there. So that's how we did it.
So building community around when somebody passes is a little different story.
Yeah.
We're challenged. We don't like talking about sad, bad, scary things.
Mm-hmm.
Death can be easily scary.
Yeah, which I kind of don't understand. So it's hard for me to meet people there.
What do you mean? Wait, what? And
I don't understand why we're scared by death.
Because we don't know what's on the other side. Most of us think that it's the end. And unless you have a religious or faith-based understanding, you may have an answer for something. But for many of us, it's still an ambiguity.
But we do things in our life that come to an end all the time.
What do you mean?
So we have jobs that come to an end. We start a project that comes to an end. We have relationships come to an end. Like, it's not foreign to us that things in our life will come to an end. And I'm not trying to minimize that this is a final ending, but it's not completely foreign because things come to an end. So, and it's also a thing that is guaranteed to happen. 100% of us are going to die.
Well,
Some way, somehow, at some point.
That leaves no room for error. Okay.
Well, I mean, talk about statistics, right? There's no halves of us, right? So for my way of approaching things, I think if it's sure, then I don't want to waste any energy being scared of it, worried about it, trying to control it. It's going to happen at some point. I'm probably not going to have control of when or how or where. And why would I want to waste any of, to poorly paraphrase the brilliant poet whose name escapes me, Mary Oliver. Like, what am I going to do with this one precious life? I'm not going to spend it worrying about how it's going to end. It doesn't make sense to me. So, and I understand it's, number one fear of many, many humans.
In addition to speaking on stage. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, which is another thing I'm not scared of. So I'm just an outlier in all kinds of ways.
But to build community around that ambiguous time in our life, even though we're accustomed to things starting, there's a middle, there's an end, like reading a book. There has to be a way of approaching that conversation, that space, in order to build community. And if we're so unsure of it, how do you create that space of comfort and maybe, for lack of other words, ability to have those conversations?
I think where we're missing out the most as a collective is in really wanting to hold on to the idea that grief is only for the death of a loved one, when we know that that's not true, right? We grieve the loss of a pet. We grieve the loss of a relationship. We grieve anytime there's change, there's loss. Anytime there's loss, there's grief. So we're actually grieving various things most of the time. I think if we could name those things grief, name them accurately what they are, that opens up a whole space for conversations, for learning from each other, for skill building in this area where we're very unskilled as a collective, so that when those big losses come, we have a bit of a toolbox. We have a bit of a comfort level. We have a sense of having tried some things, maybe they worked great, tried some other things, they didn't work as well. We have built some sense of what is my thing that I can say, what is my thing that I can do. Because what happens is we try to show up for people in those big griefs, and I am 100% certain that in my early acute grief with Ben, as a grieving mother of a son who died by suicide unexpectedly, who chose to grieve out loud, I know I was terrifying. And I was 100% not a good first assignment. So if you had not built any skills and any understanding and any sense of how you could enter this really volatile feeling space and hold your own equilibrium, I get why people weren't able to show up. I totally get it. And we can do so much better because we have this rich ground to practice that we're ignoring because we're so scared of death and grief that we don't even want to name those other losses of being worthy of grief. And I can tell you, as someone who has reached, we have this weird hierarchy of what's worthy of grief. We might say, yeah, your divorce. Yeah, you're going to have some grief, maybe. We might, we're getting better at understanding pets, regardless of the kind. We're better at, we totally get it that it's a loved one. But then even when we get to loved one, we have this strata, which is reinforced by HR policies and bereavement policies, right? I can tell you as someone who got to the pinnacle of that, right? If I hear anything consistently, it's that the loss of a child is the worst thing that could ever happen to you in your life. I hear that fairly regularly. So I can tell you from having won that contest, there's no win there for anybody. Because what happens is then I have this lived experience, which I have chosen to share and be comfortable sharing, which is not everybody's choice and is totally fine. But if you are prejudging that your loss isn't as big as mine, then you don't want to bother me with yours. And then my knowledge is lost to you, the comfort I could provide, the conversation we could have, and your knowledge is lost to me because I don't know everything. None of us do, and we never will about anything. So if we can flatten that hierarchy, take out the competition, and just understand that grief is grief is grief. And yes, some losses, more of a rupture in our life. I'm not here debating that. Absolutely, that is true. But when we try to name them and make it like yours is worse than mine or mine is worse than yours, we're creating isolation. We're pulling apart from each other. Instead of connecting as humans and saying, wow, that's a loss. I totally can see that that's a loss. And you might have some really messy feelings about that. And I'm really comfortable talking about messy feelings. I actually really love it. So if you need a space to talk about your messy feelings, I'm going to reach out and say, hey, how's the feelings today? Want to talk about messy? Because mine isn't bigger or more or better, or there's no contest to win. And when we try, we all lose.
Yeah, and that's a good way of approaching it. Just two more things before we end this conversation, because we could go on for a while, and
we could talk forever, the two of us.
So my first is anything else that you want to kind of add to this as a kind of a summation, a summary to, again, going back to our topic, and that's building your cathedral or creating this cathedral project. Any final thoughts?
I would love to say, if you have an idea, something you're passionate about, and it feels really big and scary, and you don't know where to start, call it a cathedral project. Take off the pressure of feeling like you're supposed to do it all. You got to get it done. You got to make a list. You got to execute the plan. Just acknowledge that it might be bigger than you are, and you might need help, and you might not finish it. And what a difference the world would be if everyone was dreaming that big about the impact they could have and the change they could make in the space that they feel passionate and called to serve.
Okay, I like it. So with that being said, you have added value to my cathedral project because you have joined the board of directors. Eternally grateful, and I do mean that. So how can I return the favor? How can I add value to your cathedral project?
Ooh. Oh, that's juicy.
And I'm putting myself on the spot. This
I
is
know, right? I'm like, ooh, that was not
going.
a nice last minute question because I don't have a big enough ask. You know what? You know what? Here's what I would ask of everyone. Here's how every single person can contribute to my cathedral project. Slow down your response when someone you're in the presence of is grieving. Don't rely on the cliche that wants to pop trippingly off your tongue because it's not going to serve anybody. Take a breath, say what you really mean from the heart, and see what happens next.
Wow. But I'll hold you to the question, when you think of what I can do specifically to help you build your cathedral, you let me know. Okay?
Yeah, and really go watch the TEDx. That would help. That'll build the cathedral.
Yeah, and we're gonna put the TEDx link in the description notes of this video.
Yeah, and it will help you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to see you again.
You too, my friend. So honored to be part of your mission and your cathedral project and your board. I'm so excited about the huge impact that I will be able to support you to have in this mission. Yeah, the zero number is the aim for everyone, and it's especially so important for us to be really taking better care of those that are serving and keeping us free and allowing us to have the lives that we have. And the fact that we don't take very good care of them, and we're slightly better in Canada, but it's not perfect, and we're humans, so it's not going to be perfect, but we can do better.
So with that, let me end this vlog, and I'll see you on LinkedIn. Okay?
Yes.